up, everybody? How are we doing today? Give it a minute or two here to see who's going to join. Morning, Rick. What's up, everybody? Man, I love seeing that. Everybody starts getting on. I meant to put something on a few minutes ago about I was getting ready to go live, but I forgot. I got wrapped up in something else. I got a phone call. Excuse me. How's everybody doing this morning? It feels like a Saturday today to me. I finished up the job I was working on. My son and I finished up yesterday. Been working on a church up in North Constantia, building a new room and doing a bunch of painting for their Sunday school / daycare area downstairs. So we finished up yesterday, and I don't have anything to start yet until probably at least next week at the very earliest. And even then, with Walleye Fest getting ready to go to live sales next week, I assume I'll be wrapped up in that. But again, today feels like a Saturday morning. I've been up since, I don't know, 4:30 and working on stuff, but I was sitting here at the kitchen table, which is my office. You guys will laugh if I show you this, but I mean, my wife is a saint, because if you look, I've got stuff everywhere, all the way into the corner with all my rods over there. I'm doing this on my laptop, but I mean, I have stuff everywhere. Line and boxes. She's an absolute saint. I try to keep things neat, but this is my spot, This is my spot in the world. So this is my kitchen table in my living room and my river. And so I was sitting here this morning working. I'm trying to get a couple estimates done. And the new issue of Fisherman is sitting right next to me. And the very top of this, and I've read this probably 3 times already. I got it a week ago. The very top of this is the ultimate finesse option for bass. All right. So I start reading, and you guys know me and smallmouth. And this is the feature article by Matt Straw. You see that? Bass and the skirted grub. And I'll tell you, so I then went through and I read, because I'm like, I messed around with this technique last year. This particular little skirted grub right here, I had minimal success on it. I've never really fished a fighter fly. I was with my friend Ian Renfrew last year on his boat, and he owns brown dog tackle. Sorry, I'm used to black dog in my life. He owns that, and we went out for a day, and he did catch a few fish on a marabou, finesse marabou jig that he ties and is well known for. But this skirted grub has really fascinated me. Matt Straw, in my opinion, is the greatest freshwater writer out there. No offense to my good friend Pete Robbins, who is also incredible, but Matt Straw's been doing this for a long time, and especially and it's funny, Straw started out as a steelhead guy, and also smallmouth, which the two fish, in my opinion, are 1 and 2, and that's interchangeable in the freshwater world. So I read this article this morning again for like the fifth time. And so then what I did was I then made my own sheet that I want to go through. And this is my technique sheet, you know. And this is the first time I've really did this, but there's some things I want to get. And there's, is with in Fisherman, the top of it is different setups, in the same vein, and whatever. Um, and again, like many people, I'm a kid of In Fisherman going all the way back to the beginning, having the magazine always came to the house. Either I had a subscription to it or my gramp did. And then we would share it back and forth. I've been watching the In Fisherman guys, and Al and Ron Linder going back to In Fisherman TV. That was must watch TV on Saturday or Sunday mornings when it was on. So I wanted to go get some things. So I started making a list of jigs and skirts and colors and what I wanted. And there's, there's the special pliers for the not the split ring, but the rubber ring that goes around the. Anyway, and so why am I thinking about this today? Well, part of it is because I have a little time on my hands and I love the bass fishing. We still have 2.5 weeks left of walleye season till March 15th. But if anybody saw the video I made this morning, the river has been full of pack and chunk ice going towards Cottonoi. And so that east wind out there is really howling, and it's pushing what looks like 20 miles of crushed up ice this way. Yesterday, when I went across the 81 bridge in the afternoon, the lake was open all the way to the islands. And I know it's open past that. So, sorry. But as soon as that ice is off and I can get out there, I was going to put the boat in yesterday, and then I thought about it this morning until this weather came overnight. But as soon as this weather stops, it's supposed to be back in the 40s on Sunday. I'm putting the boat back in, my old boat. I'm going back fishing. But I want to. This is something that I really want to mess around with more, and do. Really play with this more and see just how effective this is. That's the third article by him I've read on those same skirted grubs. And like I say, this is last year's attempt. It was a finesse jig that I had already had, and I trimmed it. And I don't know if it's exactly right, but whatever it is, but it's worth a try. And this is very subtle. It's got a little purple in it, but it's funny reading his article. And how many friends have I had over the year? They're like, I'll fish any jig there is as long as it's green pumpkin or black and blue or, black and purple or whatever. Really what he says is for pressured fish, which I don't know. Would you consider a night of smallmouth pressured fish? It's a big lake and there's a lot of room out there. And, those fish, walleyes too. I mean, you could be 100 yards away from me and fish a complete different school that doesn't intermingle. So if I'm fishing this school here and that other school is over there, I'm not affecting them in any way. So the fish I'm on may be pressured by me, and I don't know if one lure or if there's a couple guys in the boat or even a couple boats. I don't know how much pressure before they become pressured, but Straw says in everything he writes is all his finesse jigs like this for these bass, all of it start with pure green pumpkin and different kinds of green pumpkin, whether it be, silicone or living rubber skirting. And again, this is kind of out of the blue. You guys are like, well, why are you talking about bass jigs right now? Because this slow roll technique, and the beauty of smallmouth fishing on our lake is it's no different than walleye fishing. These fish live in the same spots. Like if you talk to any of the guys that fish walleye Wednesdays, some of those tournaments on Wednesday nights were won with guys doing nothing but throwing jerk baits. for walleyes in pretty shallow water. And in the past years, my friend Brian Hammond and Hammer Tackle came up with the Hammer Rig, which is a worm harness with a short, heavy lead, a big willow leaf to keep it weedless, because as it's spinning, because you're tossing it up in these weed beds, you're not down in the weed in the stalk, but you're going over the top. Or you could throw a soft plastic swim bait, a Kitech, over the top of those weeds. This is just one more thing to do that with. And if you're in the right spots, both species live there, and both species will eat the same thing. All fall and winter, you guys saw me out there every day, and I'm throwing the swim bait, whether it was in column somewhere on a lighter head, or I was throwing that big blue truce Kitech with that bright chartreuse head that was a 5/8 ounce head. I was throwing that, letting it sink to the bottom, and I was just plowing right all along the bottom, just like this. And every time that rod went doop and loaded up, you never quite knew whether it was a walleye or a smallmouth. And and I don't disparage. I'll catch anything, anytime, any species, but I love smallmouth. So I am really trying to dial my smallmouth game in and up another level with another real supreme confidence bait. But again, in most places, certainly on Oneida Lake, if you're in the walleyes, there are smallmouth around, and vice versa. And some of those mid-lake reefs and those rock piles that might be 20 feet all around and 6 or 8 feet on top is just as filthy with walleyes as it is with smallmouth. So I guess it's relevant. It's relevant to me because I love smallmouth fishing, and so these are going to do double duty. And I really am looking forward to getting. I'm going to put together a whole box of just those finesse jigs, those finesse skirted jigs that I'm going to have grubs on it. And the grubs are grubs. There's multiple different brands. I like to use this, I believe, is a Kalin's. I also like Zoom makes a nice grub curly tail. The original Mr. Twisters are still, one of the best. So there's a lot of different companies that make just the simple curly auger tail, and everything. It just straight reeling it, is just like the swim baits. You're just straight reeling it. You're not putting a lot of action. You can later on when the water gets warm, but cold weather, early in the season, late in the season, it's usually just slow and steady. Point your rod tip at it and just move it along so it's still moving. So it's just moving. And you just keep it rolling just like that, and you see that you're reeling along, and some days you don't even feel a tick, and that's whether it's a walleye or a smallmouth. All of a sudden, the rod tip just goes, starts to load up, and you reel all the way into it and just sweeps at them, Now, once you usually set the hook, again, depending on how cold the weather is, you can usually tell right away. My buddy Mike Casano goes, weed or walleye? Because the walleyes can be pretty mild. They just come up behind it and go like this, and then they keep right on swimming. Those bass will do the same thing, but typically once they feel that prick or that little resistance, they start to really do this with it or shoot right to the top, unless it's bitter, freezing cold water. So anyways, I just thought I would share that this morning. It's been kind of a fun morning. I stopped doing my estimates for a few minutes and was doing fishing research, which as soon as this weather that we're dealing with right now goes away, like I said, the boat's going back in. I've had enough. I have had enough. Let's see who's here this morning. I'm here. My wife just came down the stairs. She goes, I'm here. Hi, baby. Rick Menzel, Gary Walters, Mark Webb, Don Birdie. Time to get up, man. I've been up forever. Eric. Rumble Seat. Eric Wisniewski, Keith Horns. What's up, buddy? Merlin. Giovanni. Crazy weather. A buddy of mine told me the other day, he goes, it's like Powerball numbers between 1 and 80, and you never know what you're going to get each day. Yeah, he's been here all morning. Scott Duranda, how we doing? Looks like Blow Night again out there, Don Birdie says. Yeah. Well, it's funny. Now the wind has stopped dead. My both my flags are hanging completely limp. Um, Jim Carker, Scott Duranda, Kevin Stone, what's up, man? Keith Horns, they were killers on my old lake house in New Jersey on the largemouth. Yeah, you get around largemouth and you go up into Big Bay and throw that skirted, that really light, because so that's an eighth ounce head, and if I can find 16th ounce, I'll go down to those too. This has a small fiber weed guard on it that I've cut down. I do like the ones with that single wire weed guard on them. But yeah, you throw them around largemouth and they'll eat them too. And again, so will the walleyes. That's part of the point here. Merlin, open water. George Parson, green pumpkin, red flake is my favorite color on the Susquehanna for smallmouth, whether it's a tube, Senko, or any rubber. Yeah. Especially if there's any kind of stain to the water. But it's funny reading this article. He's very specific, like certain things are trigger colors. Like he said, orange. Now we're in a lake that is the primary forage is perch. So it would make sense that you would put a little orange or an orange strand or a couple strands. He's like, you got to put one strand, put it on the bottom. So it's coming off the bottom of the jig right there. He was like, everything else would be, so his perch pattern. And he says watermelon, black, and green pumpkin in equal amounts. And he's talking about using 12 to 15 strands total in his skirting. So even this is a little heavy. So it really is very light, and it just does one of these in the water. And so he's saying, so you use 4 to 5 strands each of watermelon, black, and green pumpkin, and one strand of orange coming off the bottom of the jig. One. And even then he goes, sometimes you got to cut that back so it's just outside the collar. So he goes, you might have no more than a quarter to a half inch long strand that would be right there of one strand of orange coming out just as a trigger. And I'm like, that sounds cool. That's the level of detail that you start dialing in, and he went through other color patterns and like there are some favorite colors I have out here, so I would mess around with those a little, but most of the stuff I buy and I'm going to make is going to be green pumpkin based. Jed Paulson, good morning. Robert Becker, Roman Bro, what's that jig called? I don't remember what this one was, but he has 3 that you can still get that in this article he references, and that's the Terminator finesse jig. Although when you look at it, the Terminator, and this one was one too. I don't know if this was the Terminator or not, but this was a finesse jig that I bought commercially, and the front had the little stubby pieces of material sticking out. So when it would fall, at that point, this finesse jig was made to fall like this, and the front of it kind of it came this way, and the front of it acted like almost a stand. So it almost was similar to a Ned rig. He's not doing that with these. You're swimming these, which means just a straight, steady retrieve. I'm not sure what this one is, but he's talked about the Terminator finesse jigs, the Strike King Bitsy Bug, and Bass Team Tackle has a micro BT jig, which you can get on. As a matter of fact, I just sent them a message this morning because I don't want a dress jig. I just want the jig heads. And so I talked to them at Bass Tackle and said, I'd like to get a dozen of those micro heads in just flat green pumpkin with the weed guards on them, and then I'll put my own skirts on them. But you can get that in a fine wire option. A lot of bass jigs are crazy, crazy heavy wire hooks for largemouth and fishing them on heavy braid and heavy stiff rods. So you got to have something that doesn't just open right up. I remember when the Kitech football jig started going crazy when I started selling Kitech at my tackle shop at the old River Rat. Everybody was catching tons of largemouth on them out here because in even those days, that was back early 2000s, like 2009, 10, 11, somewhere's in there. This was still, if you wanted to win a tournament on Oneida, you had to fish green ones and not brown ones. And so everybody was catching tons of largemouth on those fine wire Kitech jigs. but fishing them on like flipping gear, and you would open the hooks right up on them like a frog spear. And all the heavy duty largemouth fishermen were like, man, it's too light, it's no good. But boy, the bass ate it like crazy. Nowadays, you're looking for smallmouth, and now they're the same size. But for me, I'm not a tournament fisherman. I fish that kind of stuff, so I'm going to be fishing something like this on a spinning rod. You could throw it on a bait caster, but I wouldn't be able to, probably, because something that light, to me, is just more conducive to a spinning rod and a really long light action spinning rod, like my new JTX medium mag light is a 7'9", and that I got that rod from JT Outdoors specifically for doing this kind of stuff. And they even have another one that's a 9-footer. Again, I'm not a tournament fisherman, so I don't have any rod length restrictions like those guys do. That I could fish really light line on. Now, I just got a box in from Cortland yesterday, and I got 2 big spools, 1,500-yard spools of master braid in my favorite color, so I can see it. But this 8-pound master braid, it's 1 pound mono diameter, which is 0.005. And that is thinny thin. Now, Straw says in this article about throwing these on 4 and 6 pound test monofilament because it doesn't sink so fast and it's a little bit bigger diameter, so it keeps giving that lure that floating feeling. Again, suspended walleyes out over deep water in the summertime, the mayfly hatch, you could make this thing look just like a big mayfly bug, brown, black, green pumpkin. And last year, I don't know how many of us really suffered at times during that mayfly hatch that seemed to go on forever. But if that's going to be the norm going forward, I want to have something else that because I fished, my end is way more mud than the east end, which is where that mayfly larva lives. So I want something that's a little more effective that I can finesse throw for whatever, and that's walleyes and smallmouth out on those flats. So I don't know. I just thought this was all interesting this morning. Mike from Connecticut. Morning, guys. Been a few weeks. Missed the gathering, of course, with stomach bug, par for the course. Jigs look great. We saw the open water on the shore camera 10 days earlier than 22. Yeah. I'm itchy. Like I say, when Danny and I got home from the job yesterday, we almost put the boat in the water. I didn't feel great, so I didn't do it. And then, which I'm glad, because now all this snow and freezing rain came. Have you ever used Ned Rigs in the cold? All colors killer. I have not ever fished the Ned Rig extensively. I have a bunch of them. I'm geared up to do it. I'm usually drift fishing without, my boat without a bow mount, and trying to drift fish with the Ned Rig isn't ideal. It's really a spot on the spot kind of thing. So I've not fished the Ned Rig much, nor with much success, but I believe that that's just simply because I haven't fished it much. And I'll be honest with you, I have short attention span. So moving baits are better for me. Casting crankbaits are better with me. That's part of the reason why I love the blade bait so much, because it's constant, instant gratification. As soon as you lift that rod tip and you feel, I know it's working. And as long as I know it's working, if I put it anywhere near a fish, I just assume they're going to eat it, because it's been proven repeatedly that they do. So I like a lot of those kind of baits. I never have been a tube fisherman, and I fished with friends of mine. My buddy Nate is one of them that is killer with a tube. He's got the patience of a saint. I don't. And I've watched him one right after another tune fish on a tube. I don't do that. And the Ned to me is even slower than a tube. At least that's my opinion, and I could be wrong. But Ned Rigs are great for all. Again, I know I'm sure, and maybe now this season with a boat again that has a bow mount on it, and I can put myself in that position to where I'm not drifting and I can hold tight on something. Then certainly, if you want to pick it apart with something smaller presentation that's way more precise, I'm sure I'll do that more. No question. These guys are telling jokes back and forth. Jim Carker at Rumble Seat. What do you call a fish with no eyes? And he goes, FSH. No eye.
Still fish.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible, Jim. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. Are you throwing those jigs on a soft action light rod or a stiffer? No, soft. Long, soft, light line, that kind of thing. Does Cortland Line have a website to order their braid? Yes, cortlandline.com, I think. Yeah, I think so. If you Google search them, yes. Just Paul, love a tube. Again, people are, like my grandfather would have loved fishing tubes because, he's the same guy that used to build decks with his 12-foot tape measure going down to the 32ndths of an inch. And he'd say to me, I was a kid, he'd be like, oh, I'll cut this at 17/30 seconds. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, and I'm looking at my tape measure going, I don't have anything like that. I go, how about we get it to the nearest eighth? He goes, geez, it's going to be off. I'm like, the difference between a 16th and an eighth, and so he was that kind of precision guy. He would have loved tube fishing because he, like I say, he could. Same with jerkbait fishing in cold water, where you hit it and then it sits there for a minute. That's too long for me. I count to about 10 and then I'm like, okay, that's long enough. Boom, and I do it again. A minute. I'm not doing it. I don't even think I'd be able to do that. Tell me to sit here quietly for a minute, and something is going to explode. My head, my hands, something. I wonder how many different streams walleyes go up to spawn in the spring. My guess would be anything that flows into this lake. Some of them will go up. I would bet Big Bay Creek, Chittenango, the Barge Canal, obviously Scriba, any little trickle that's got water in it, I'm going to assume that they're historically are going to try to go up in there. I don't know that for sure. But so that's my morning. We're closing in on 30 minutes, so perfect. I hope everybody had fun. Anybody got any final questions or anything about what we talked about today? We'll get into more. I think we got the logo finalized for Walleye Fest. It's awesome. It's awesome. My buddy Chuck Orlando sketched it after I got frustrated and couldn't figure out how I wanted to look, and he came up with a great one. And our graphic designer Brian made it go from a sketch in pencil to something real. Hopefully I'll be able to show everybody that starting later today. We're less than a week away from the start of ticket sales. Everybody's going to be getting a welcome email from me here sometime in the next couple of days over the weekend. So tons and tons and tons of great stuff going on. Are you close to finishing the website? Yes. On a soft action rod with light line and mono, you are having difficulty setting the hook due to the mono stretch. Well, it doesn't have to be, but the trick is, now I don't know if anybody remembers last fall, I had my big noodle rod out a couple times. It's a 10.5 footer. I had 4-pound test on it. I could chuck those little baits a mile, let it settle. I went to just adjust my glasses. I don't have any glasses on. I just went just like this. Good Lord. So even with that, even with the noodle rod and that 4-pound mono, you just had to reel and load that rod all the way down until it came tight, which is then taking all the stretch out of the line, the action of the rod. It loads everything tight like this. And then when you come back, that's the best chance you have. when you're throwing those things a long ways away on light line and light rods, and as soon as you feel that tick, you can't. It's like if anybody has ever been a frog fisherman, the hollow body surface frogs, it's like this. It's got upturned hooks, and that largemouth has got to come up, blow up on it. You've got to wait and wait and wait. He's got to take it, turn, and go back down before you can come tight. And because as soon as you do it on the blow up, it's not even in his mouth yet. His mouth is literally still like this, and you do this because it's so instantaneous. You would fish that rod on a super extra fast tip, heavy action, 50-pound braid. Boom, pull it right away from him. If you tried to set on the initial feeling when you're fishing that light stuff way out there, you could move that rod all you want. You didn't even move that jig. So if he had it, you never set a hook into him at all. You've got to keep reeling. Some of those videos of mine, I'll say it to you, that day that Don Birdie and I were out and smashed him in the fall, I'm reeling along and you'd feel that. You'd feel it. And I'm watching my tip the whole time like this, and you'll start to just see that tip go like this. He's already got it, and he's way out there. And you can't, I'd be like, okay, there he is. And then I'd start reeling to get tight and then come back. So you really got to wait on it. And that's where the angler has to not tell this what to do yet, or at least not to overreact. You got to give it time. Other bites are way more direct and instantaneous, a blade, a jig and wrap. But those things out there on light line, I'm not saying you have to throw it on mono. I've done it. It does spin up on me quite a bit. I probably will try it originally this season with braid and a touch longer, lighter fluorocarbon leader, just to see how that works. I'm sure it'll be fine. Again, one of my good friends, Mike Casano, when we fished together last year, and Mike is an excellent, and he put on a clinic that day with me. He's an excellent swim bait fisherman. That's his go-to. He is very good at it all through the water column. And he goes, I run the same stuff on every one of my rods. He goes, I run braid to fluorocarbon, and it doesn't bother them one bit. You can't argue with success. I watched him at one point get me 5-1 when he was throwing a swim bait and I was throwing a blade that morning. At least 5-1. Bass and walleye, didn't matter. They'll both eat it. So long story short, I went over time, but as you look for a new boat, what are your must-haves on the next boat? It's funny. Most of them nowadays all have the basic must-haves. Front and aft live wells, plenty of room. I don't foresee myself fishing more than 3 total people in the boat anyway. But I would be able to take a 4th if we were trolling. The ability to take accessories on and off the gunnel, like rod holders, downriggers, stuff like that. Certainly a kicker trolling motor or kicker motor off the big motor tied in. Second set of throttles, a bow mount, spot lock. Add-ons will be. I'm leaning towards some form of live target, live scope, whether I'm not sure which brand of I'll be going with, whether it's going to be Humminbird, Lowrance, or Garmin. I have Garmin currently. I've loved them. I have no experience with the other 2 units now recently in these modern era. So those are my ease of trailer ability, it being the right size. It's got to be 20 foot or bigger so I can just go. I have been looking at ones that have removable removable soft tops, canopies. And if it has one, it's got to be a stand up. So you can stand up while you're trolling with a couple people up in the cabin. So those are what I'm looking for in a boat, the right layout, the right feel. You can get them all you can get any brand with almost any size and make outboard you have on them now. Obviously, in today's age, there are still companies out there that make 2 strokes, but I'm going 4-stroke. I'm not dealing with two strokes ever again, for a lot of reasons, but I'm not doing that ever again. So my kicker and my big motor will both be 4-stroke. Dual axle trailer, bunk trailer, easy to load and unload by myself, and I can power load by myself. So those kind of things. That's ease of use, because I want to be able to be mobile on a daily basis, whether I'm by myself or with other people, so I don't have to worry about having it be a pain, or if you think about your boat every time you load or unload it is a pain in the ass, then you're not going to load and unload it very often, and you might just as well get a marina slip and leave it in the water. And not that that's a bad thing, it just locks you in a little more to one place. I want to be mobile. I want to be able to throw it on the trailer in 5 minutes and go, and just same way with unloading it. And the new bunk trailers are that way. You've got a lot of different gadgets you can put on your trailer now for solo unassisted. Look, I just want to move my glasses again. I would just went like that. God, I don't have glasses on. So let's see. Band-Aid compartment. Yeah. See my hand? I got matching set of scars. That was from I just did it again. The trim cart in Home Depot where you can cut trim down to size if you want it. I'm doing it the other day, and Danny and I are talking. I'm going like this, and I went through all the trim that I had. I had a little handful of it, and the saw went through unadulterated, and I went smash, and I smashed my hand right into the rough V that everybody's gouged out of this thing. Peeled the skin right off my hand in 4 spots, just like that. I'm like, I learned something today. Reel down, let the rod load up, and then pull back. And 2, that's from a lifetime of, quite honestly, noodle rod fishing for steelhead on the Salmon River for me, using super, super light line, long, wispy rods. And, in the original days, everything was bottom bouncing. There was no float fishing. The only people that I ever remember with float and center pin rods were Canadians, and even then, when they came down in those days, all of us didn't want them around because they would sit there at the top of the pool and run those floats through the whole pool, and that was unheard of for us because we were all bottom bouncing with a noodle rod. So there would be a slinky or a drop shot with split shot on it or whatever, and then you'd have a leader behind however long, and either a fly, an egg sack, you name it, but you would, especially when it was a long distance away, you're drifting like this, and you'd see and feel that hit, but you really had to wait. And that never was more evident. A friend of mine, Tony Gulisano, I never will forget. And him and I used to fish daily when we lived together at the old Sportsman's Lodge. We used to go down. I remember when he bought a Cabela's Fish Eagle, that beautiful green blank, and it was 11.5 foot or 12.5 foot. It was in those days you could get 9-foot noodle rods and 10.5s. Anything above that I'd never seen. I had a couple St. Croix, I think, in those days. And that rod of his was so soft. And if you went to set the hook before the rod was loaded, the blank would go like this. And so you'd go to set real hard or fast, and that rod would flex this way, and it would push line towards the fish, and then it would bow up like this, and then it would start its power band to come up. And I remember that first week or so when he bought that, and he must have missed 2 or 3 days worth of fish in a row until he finally figured out that when he saw that bite and that rod was still up, he'd start to gently raise that rod until that line loaded, and really, so it came tight, and that rod really loaded up. And then when he came up, it was tight like that, and it would drive that hook right home. It's the same principle with what we're doing out on the lake. It's the same exact principle. And it's a lot of fun. And that they're there before you ever set the hook. Boom, there he is. Ask Don Birdie. He sat there tonight. I'd be like, we're talking along. I'd be like, there he is. He goes, what? I go, like that. Like 30 seconds later, maybe not 30 seconds, but because you feel them most of the time out there before you get up on. Fun shopping for both. Thanks, Paul. All right, let's do it. It's 40 minutes now. We got stuff to do. You guys got stuff to do. Everybody's got stuff to do. I'll see you tomorrow morning. All right, guys. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Weekend's in sight. Even if the weather's going to be a little cruddy, weekend's in sight. Be good to yourself today. Keep your tip up.